What up, Muggles? This is Fyrebyrd, and I'm here with CRMEDIAGAL, and you're listening to the Dusty Cauldron, where we talk about all things Harry Potter and the witchy world at large. CRMEDIAGAL, would you like to introduce yourself, or just say hello?
Hello.
So today, we are going to talk about sort of the behind the curtain for fan fiction writers. So both of us are writers. CRMEDIAGAL is very talented, and we're going to talk about what she likes about fan fiction, what she does in her approach to writing, that sort of thing. And so let's just jump in with the first question of, when you're writing your fan fiction stories, how close to canon do you like to keep your plot lines?
I'd say maybe 40-60 as far as I like to keep compliant with certain aspects of canon to make what I'm going to introduce, whether it's new characters or just whatever the existing characters are going to work with as far as the plot line goes, to make it more believable. So I do like mixing both, but yeah, I'd say canon probably 40-60, because I think it has to be based, obviously, you have to keep some aspects of that canon world compliant in order to make whatever you're going to do with these characters more interesting and worthwhile to the reader. So, yeah, I like to keep some of it there.
I like that. I tend to agree, and I think of it as like, it makes it more believable, which is sort of silly, right? Because we're writing about a magical world, but I feel like it bases it more in something that like a reader can connect to. I personally am a fan of like trying to write them in a way that, even if it's something that clearly didn't happen in canon, you could almost believe that it happened, but Harry just didn't see it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's like folded into the background. That's kind of my favorite approach. Though I have written one extremely AU one where I actually did a crossover between the Hunger Games and Harry Potter. And I mean, I threw the plot of both stories out of the window, frankly. Like, there were little parts that were tied in because when I wrote it, I made Hermione be Foxface. Like, it was a whole thing. But still, like, how Foxface, like, dies in the arena, like, I kept that, like, Hermione, quote-unquote, dies. There was a whole trick to it where she wasn't actually dead because of magic. But so I guess I did, like, to a certain extent, use some very basic plot points. But that's as far as I've gotten from, like, really going AU.
Yeah, no, I get that. Like, I mean, obviously, in canon, Severus Snape, quote-unquote, dies. I mean, Harry moves on during the Hogwarts battle. We never see him again. So, I mean,
he could.
I'm sure some say, well, maybe he snuck off. You know, he slid off and like healed. You know, whatever. But like, yeah. So like, majority of my fanfic deals with Severus Snape living beyond the Battle of Hogwarts. So like, just in that realm alone, I have to try and make how he heals believable, how he got away, how Harry watched him die, but somehow he miraculously lives. So there's all these plot components that you get to introduce within the magical realm, but I always feel like you have to start with reality at some level to make people even want to tune in and read it, because, well, yeah, how did he heal himself? How do you move around that? I think that's part of the challenge of fanfic that I love, is when you're dealing with, especially characters that die in canon, that we bring back to life, because we can't bear what happens in canon. So
yeah, and I actually think that the Snape's death one is a great example of how readers will choose to filter on sort of believability of the mechanic for him to live. Because sometimes it's something that's so far-fetched that even within like the world of Harry Potter, you're like, yeah, that would never happen. And I feel like those stories will have lower reads. Yeah. Yeah,
no, it's you have to be clever about it, but I always start with the realm of reality in some respect. Like how realistically could he have lived? You know, instead of just, you know, pointing a wand at himself and miraculously, you know, healing his throat. Like, you know, it's, yeah, it always starts with a base of reality for me.
Totally fair. What would you say is your favorite fic genre, or like your comfort zone for when you're reading instead of writing? Or even your favorite zone to write in?
I'd say definitely both to write and to read. It's hurt comfort. I love my favorite characters who tend to be very, very broken people. I love seeing them basically nursed back to life, in a sense. Not just, physically if they've been wounded or whatever, or like in Snape's case, dies in canon, but just reinvigorated and participating in life again. So I'm a sucker for the hurt comfort genre. And I definitely say a close second would be angst. I don't want any angst in my personal life, but I love torturing characters that I love for some reason, especially one-true pairings when they're in love and they can't properly communicate like adults. Like I love that angst aspect too. I'm a sucker for it.
No judgment. I mean, first of all, there's an entire movie industry built on exactly what you're talking about right now. I tend to fall the same, though. The only thing I would differ on is I also really enjoy just like the adventure plot lines, and so in those you tend to have some of like the romantic piece fall away. I feel like the angst is definitely still there. And you may never get like the hurt comfort in an adventure. It really depends on where the author takes that adventure story. But I like kind of going on that ride with them, because it's like a vicarious, like I don't want that level of adventure in my real life. I want like some calm, just normal everyday stuff. So reading is escapism, right? I like to have the excitement be in reading, but I always will go back to like hurt comfort as like a nice little like comfort story when you just want to relax and read something sweet.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's there's always that component of fanfic that I think is especially important today, that I think some readers, especially younger readers, lack the reminder that just because we love to write it or love to read about it doesn't necessarily mean it's something that we either agree with or want in our personal lives. We just, that's part of like what you said about fanfic. It's escapism. So we don't necessarily want the drama of two characters not being able to properly communicate with each other and make things work. But we love to read about it because it's thrilling and it's more interesting perhaps than what's going on in our own lives, and that's okay.
Yeah. I had another fan fiction author on a few episodes back, and we weren't really talking about like writing fan fiction so much as like different pairings, but something that came up a lot in that episode was just that fan fiction can be a form of therapy. And so it makes sense that we would take these things that we don't want in our real life, but play them out in a story, because it's sort of like a safe way to practice how to handle that sort of situation, even though you hope to never handle it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I would definitely say fanfic, the first decade or so that I was writing it was my personal therapy. It was how I came home and I de-stressed from the day and what was ever going on in my life. I 100% agree with that.
Same. Okay, which trope do you hate the most or love to hate?
I don't hate any trope because I feel like that's probably too strong of a word for me. But I definitely am probably in the minority in that I don't love time travel. I never have. There's especially a lot of big name fanfics in the Severus and Hermione genre that I primarily write in, and that they're mainly all time travel. And I don't know, it's just not something that has ever appealed to me. I guess particularly when it comes to Harry Potter and the Wizarding World, because there's so much magical components to that world already to divulge in that I think time travel is just completely unnecessary.
I can totally appreciate that.
Yeah, and I guess the only other one would be I never read them anyway. It's just not something that appeals to me at all. Would be self-inserts. I can't get behind those at all. And not to be cliche, but a lot of them are normally, they're harmless, and they're written by usually very, very young amateur writers, and that's okay. Like, that, whatever, like, they love this character, they want to self-insert themselves, like, that's fine, whatever. Again, a form of therapy maybe, but don't want to read it.
Totally fair. Totally fair. I think the act of writing is what was important in that situation, because they just want to participate in the world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard. It's, you know, it's harmless. It's whatever. It's just, yeah, that's not something that I seek out.
Totally fair. I actually tend to read a lot of the time travel ones, and it's, for me, there's actually no draw to the time travel. It's just that when I was really reading a lot of fan fiction stories, I did gravitate towards the Severus Hermione pairing and the Severus Lupin pairing, and time travel made me feel less bothered by the age issues, because then it was like traveling to when they're a teen, or it's in common day but she has traveled so much that her actual age is higher, that sort of thing.
Gotcha. I that's fair. I understand that. I think, yeah, and I think you can fall into like two categories there. There's people that really, the age difference appeals to them, and that's like the main draw for the pairing. Mm-hmm. And then there's people like yourself who are like, okay, I see the appeal of this pairing, but I like it better if there's time travel.
Yeah.
And it feels more appropriate and comfortable to read. I totally understand that.
Right. I wish there had been a character in the age group of Hermione that mirrored Lupin more effectively. But, well, I mean, frankly, any pairing other than putting her with Ron would have made me happy. But, like, her put with the personality type of Lupin would have made sense, but it would be preferable that Lupin were also a teenager.
Yeah. I think that's a sad sort of dilemma with Hermione, is there's really nobody suitable for her in her own age group.
Right? She's so much smarter than them.
It's just, I know people like love Hermione and Draco, but he's to me anyway, he's still so immature. He's like Ron, he's so immature in so many respects. It's like, she needs a guy, a teenager who's actually mature, and good luck to her.
Yeah.
Good luck for finding that.
Maybe when she's an adult. She may be single till adulthood.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's just like telling to the fandom and people who write and all of that even J.K. Rowling was like, I thought about putting her with Harry. Like, even she's like, I don't know if Ron's a good pair.
Yeah. Well, and at the same time, it's also like, well, I don't know. I think always, for me, with one of my big contentions, and I love Harry Potter, and I deeply appreciate what Rowling did with this series, is that why did she have to end up with either one of them? Exactly. Realistically, like, why couldn't she just have two best guy mates? Like, why did she even have to end up with one of them? I just, that never appealed to me, and I never understood that. It always bothered me.
It's so common in literature and in movies. Like, the girl has to be paired off with someone, and so many of them are like these stupid love triangles. I'm like, how about she just lives? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Why can't a girl have two best guy mates, and that's that? Why does there have to be a romantic component to any of it? Like, jeez.
I feel like they get told by publishers and producers, like, oh, that won't sell. And it's like, but if so many people are saying, why did she have to be with him? I think it would. I think if you gave it a chance and actually put a story out there, and they, like, I felt like they started to do it with the Hunger Games series, because, like, Katniss's character is, like, not interested in anyone, but then by the end of the trilogy, they have paired her off. And I'm like, God, you've got to be kidding me.
I know, and Hermione's so independent, and Ron and Harry are always complaining and poking fun at the fact that they're not on her intellectual level, and vice versa. And at the end, she ends up with Ron of all the characters. It's like, really? No, she wouldn't, though. Like, you set her up to be different than how things work out in the end. It just
right, and
that
made
always
it clear. Made it clear that like Ron wants to marry a carbon copy of his mother, and Hermione could not be farther from that.
I know, exactly. I just, yeah. It's a huge question mark in that whole series.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so in all of the amazing stories that you've written, which one do you think was your favorite one to write?
Just
casually pick a favorite child.
Yeah, no. Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I think it's no surprise to anybody who's read my work, it would be Unquestionable Love, because that was always been completely self-indulgent for me. It's what I would want for Severus Snape, canon-wise, if it was remotely possible. So yeah, I would definitely say that one, but I'd also have to probably pick one of the ones I'm most proud of, and just on a technical level would be Saint Severus, which was that's my newest Severus and Hermione story that I completed. Gosh, it's probably 2 years ago now, but I think that having the challenge of, because that was another story that takes place both in the Muggle world and in the Wizarding world, but it's also very loosely based on a movie called St. Vincent. And it was a prompt from a reader of mine. And I just think technically that's some of the best writing that I've been able to put out there so far. And it really invigorated me to keep going with writing, that like, yeah, I'm on the right path here, that I'm enjoying this again. It was the first story in a while that I'd really loved digging into. So I have a lot of like good vibes attached to that story. It was a fun challenge, and your hope always as a writer, of course, is that you're going to get better and better and better as the more experience with writing that you get. So I'd also have to choose that one too, just for just on a technical level.
I'm glad that you mentioned that one, because that is my favorite story that you've ever written. Like, I was a huge fan of Unquestionable Love, and I'm forgetting the title of the other one, but the one that was like mashup with The Sound of Music. Loved that as well. But my favorite, hands down, is Saint Severus.
Yeah, Sound of Magic. That was a fun challenge too. I'd forgotten about that one. I'm glad you mentioned that. I loved writing that one. That was so much fun. I think that's one of the big challenges with fanfic that I personally enjoy the most, is because those were both prompts from readers where they're like, okay, we love the Wizarding world aspect, but can you take Severus and Hermione and put them in this world as well? So like having to mix like Sound of Music and Harry Potter was bananas to do that, but it was so much fun. And then, doing St. Severus and St. Vincent, like, yeah, I love being able to pick and choose different aspects from canon, from both, while also doing my own thing. Like, that's when I feel most creative as a writer, I'd say. So yeah, those were so much fun to write.
That's awesome. My favorite to write, and I should preface with like I've taken down my entire profile. None of this can ever be found online, so no one will be able to read it. But
you did?
Yeah. It's probably been like 4 or 5 years now. I started like moving up levels in my career, where now like my job has like a political tone to it. And so I was like, even though I use a pen name and it's like an email unassociated with me, it would, in theory, be possible for someone to somehow track this back to me. And the last thing I need is for like my fan fiction to end up in the newspaper. So I took everything down.
I'm sorry that you had to do that, though. That's a shame.
That's okay, because I can still write whatever I want. It's for me, which when you think about it, at the end of the day, like fan fiction always was for me.
Yeah.
I just happened to share it. But my favorite to write was Chosen, which had an OC character in it, but was not a self-insert. It was this character that I had seen the cover of another book, and I can't even remember now if the book was called like Fire Girl or something. Like, I never even read this book. I saw the cover art and it just like really inspired me with the idea of like, if a phoenix could turn into a person, like what would that mean? And that was sort of the premise that began Chosen even happening. And I really enjoyed writing it because I basically just went book by book through the series, but like, how would these events be different with this sort of hybrid magical creature involved? And I found that just so fun to write and to sort of come up with my own, like, how this magical creature works. Like, I let it be informed by like reading different cultures, legends about phoenixes and stuff like that, but largely I was creating my own lore, which I really enjoyed.
That's cool, because like that's borderline original writing, you know?
Yeah, like I have thought from time to time I could pull this concept out of the Harry Potter world and turn it into a standalone, and the only thing that has stopped me from doing it is I don't know how close it would be to that book that I read. I didn't read it, I saw it. So like I would need to read the book and understand like what realm it was in to ensure that like I really was not just inadvertently creating a carbon copy of a book that exists.
Yeah. Pray that it's nothing like what you came up with. Because that would be crushing.
That it would be. It'd be like, I didn't even read the book and somehow it is
I thought I was brilliant.
Yeah. I can't even like really properly envision the cover art anymore. I know that it wasn't this book, but Ridgeback and I were talking about like, was it Firestarter? Because that's sort of a concept, right, of like a person with some sort of phoenix level ability because they can create fire. But
yeah.
I inferred from the cover of the book that this person did truly like transform into a bird. But who knows? Maybe they didn't. Maybe, I don't know. Because like I said, I never read it. But it led to one of my favorite fics to write.
That's awesome.
My close second child is, I probably would not be enjoyed by you because it is a time turner story.
Sorry.
No, it's totally fine. And it was called Glimpses of Heaven. And it was a sequel to a different one that I had written. So like because I'd gone fairly AU with the first one, so then a sequel to that made it like extremely AU, but I still tried to tie it into things that were happening at Hogwarts. And now for the life of me, I can't remember the title of the first one to say like, oh, it was the sequel to, which is so pathetic that I can't remember the title of the first one, because that is the one and only time that, you know, there were all those like online competitions for like best whip or like whatever, like you could win.
Yeah.
That the first one that I can't remember the title of, I actually won an award for like best work in progress. And now I don't even remember the name of this story. Like, how sad is that? If I went digging through my computer, like I still have it on there. Like I could find the title, but for the life of me, I can't remember what it is right now. But Glimpses of Heaven was like a sequel to that one. And I think that it is my second favorite just because like that one is the most like therapy based one that I ever wrote. So it was so healing to me to write it and like work through my own crap in those chapters.
Those are always the best though. That's how I feel about Unquestionable Love. It was the healing process as much for me as, you know,
yeah,
hopefully. I know it's been for some other people too. So like, yeah, those are always, they're the most personal, but they're always going to be our babies.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's why fan fiction perseveres. And frankly, I think it's why the written word and like telling stories perseveres, because so much of it is us like applying ourselves to that storyline and like working through what we need to work through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if it connects with one person, then we did our job.
Yeah, for sure. So thinking about that sort of concept and how you can make something even more powerful sometimes by giving it visual. If you could turn either a fic that you've written or a fic that you've read into a film, which one would you choose and why?
Oh, man.
This is a $1 million question.
Yeah. I mean, being totally self-indulgent again, I'd want to say Unquestionable Love, to be honest.
Yeah.
I I think just because selfishly, I would love to see my OC's, his 4 daughters brought to life. I would love to see, how a casting director would cast those characters. Mm-hmm. On selfish reasons, I'd love to see that. But I think I would also love to see possibly Unto Their Own brought to. It would be a heavy, dark story to for people to visually take, but that writing that story was such a challenge for me personally, because it took me to some places I wasn't prepared to go. I think on that level alone, I would love to see how visually that might affect people.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a genre or like a market for those dark stories, so I think you would find an audience.
Oh yeah, it would have a gazillion trigger warnings for sure, but you'd have to go on. You'd have to own Netflix to be able to watch it or something. But
or HBO Max
to watch. But I think those would be my.
Fair. And I would watch the crap out of Unquestionable Love. I think that would have to be made into like a mini series because there's so much meat to that story, but I would watch that.
That's why I'm selfishly like, well, it could be a film, but you could do several films. I'd love that.
Yeah. I think from the whole world of fan fiction, had to pick one, I would really struggle. So I'm going to give you 2. I would really love to see, and now this title is in Latin, so I could be butchering it, Post Tenebris Lux.
Okay.
That one was a great one. It's another SSHG, and I loved that it was like post-war, and we're already like to a certain level of healing with Severus when we run into him, but then there's so much more to come, so it's for sure a hurt comfort, though I don't know that the author ever actually tagged it as that, because I think I just stumbled upon it looking for SSHG, but like we sort of out of the blue have Hermione run into him in like a train station, and he's standing there in like ratty jeans and like a rock band t-shirt, and something about that like hooked me, and then like we pull in and it's just this great story of like 2 adults trying to help each other heal, and it's working through really interesting concepts of what does it look like post-war for anyone who's like experienced a significant amount of time under the Cruciatus curse. Like, fascinating. I would love to see that one as a movie. And then I really did enjoy Debt of Time, and I would want to see that one put as
That's a time, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think
it's a major time travel story, so I could see how you would lose your taste for it really quickly. But as a person who really buys into that,
one of the popular ones, for sure, and at least in the SSA. Yeah,
and I feel like she's won like tons of awards within the community for that story, and like people go back to it. Like there's like subreddits about like, oh, I'm on like my 6th reread of Dead of Time, and here's this thing I noticed for the first time. I even like, so I've been out of fan fiction for a while, but I was like on TikTok, and somehow I ended up on like a series of TikTok videos where like ultimately like I ran into people talking about Dead of Time in the comments, and I'm like, how did I get here? I haven't thought about this story in years. TikTok's just reading my soul, I guess.
Wow, I would never think that Severus and Hermione would make it to TikTok in any capacity without getting immediately flagged and taken down. So that's actually really cool.
I think they got away with it because they just used a story title, and like people who are in the world know exactly what that was about, but like no one was saying the words that would absolutely get like content monitored. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I don't know. I haven't ever really thought about seeing one of my own stories, but I guess if I was going to pick one, I would say Chosen. Like that one I would want to see. But then I also think it would be so hard to see it, because what if like you see what happens with like book adaptations where they're not necessarily faithful to the book. I'm like, could I survive that? If a producer was like, oh, I think it would be better if we did this, I'd be like, I will die on this hill. You are not going to do that.
hard to give up that kind of control over, you know, and I know it probably sounds silly because it's fanfic. Like we're playing in somebody else's world to begin with, but we take them off in these original directions.
And then you you own it and you love it.
Yeah. And you like add new characters that are completely from your own head. And yeah, that would be tough. As fascinated as I am to be like, especially with Unquestionable Love, to see those kids brought to life, I'm also like, oh, but what if they got it really wrong? Right. what do I do?
Can you still claim it? Yeah.
This isn't mine. Like, read the original.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting how attached we can get to things. So, like, I'm not doing fan fiction writing anymore, but I have been doing some writing for radio plays. And I just sent a script to the, like, editor/producer, and he sent back notes. And, like, one of the notes was that he wants to change the title. And I am so bothered. Like, I'm not over it yet. I'm like, I hear you and what you're saying and why you think that it should have another title, but I really don't want to do that because this is my title that I spent so much time coming up with.
Well, that's one of, like, the most important aspects. Like, it's actually, like, yeah, it's probably the most important aspect. Oh, yeah, that's hard.
Right? Like, I'll end up doing it because I want the radio play to be published, but... my baby. So how do you approach to writing a story? Do you plot it out start to finish, go chapter by chapter? Are you more of a, like, write the scenes that inspire you most and then work the story around it, or something else, some other version that I'm not thinking of?
I guess mine is a bit organic, but it's also planned out. I do a bit of both. I definitely tend to come up with the main plot first and foremost, and the title is always one of the first things. I'm not sure why, it has to happen that way for me. But then I definitely write organically in the sense that I do like to write start to finish. And I have a couple points in my head, chapter to chapter, that I want to make sure I hit. But beyond that, I like to kind of just let the scenes play out and write what comes to me. And I can always go back and heavily edit or add to, take away. So I definitely like to write start to finish in that sense. But beyond that, I also like to be surprised by the writing process. I always find that the most fun, and I end up coming up with things that I'm like, oh, if I had thought about that ahead of time, that never would have happened. So I like the happy accidents that can happen when you just allow things to just flow and let things happen on their own. So
yeah, I like that. And I feel like that's so common, not only in fan fiction, but in regular writing, because you'll so often, if you hear writers talk about their work, they're like, oh yeah, and then this character told me that they needed to do this. And, like, obviously the character's not talking to them, right? It's that sort of organic moment that's happening where as you're moving through it and maybe you have a skeleton outline of where you want to go, you see, well, this is how they would have reacted to that. And it creates this whole scene that you never contrived at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I think having those main points that you want to hit chapter to chapter is a good thing, because that helps you kind of stay on task and helps you stay in the flow of the story itself instead of, like, letting it go off in a gazillion different directions. Yeah. But, you know, it's good to let your characters play. That's part of the joy of writing, is letting them, especially, I love that, especially when it comes to dialogue, not so much what the character is doing scene to scene, more what they're saying to each other. I love the back and forth surprises that can happen, just like it would in an everyday conversation. So yeah, that's why.
Yeah, I feel like my approach is very similar, although I feel like I do a little bit of both, because typically what leads me to write a story is, like, something I've heard or something I've seen or whatever inspires a thought that is, like, a component of the story that's going to exist. And it's never the beginning. It's very rarely that I'm having an inspiration that's like, okay, and now the story comes from here. And so it's like I take that and then I kind of, like, weave around it with plot points on either side, and I end up with that skeleton structure of where I want to go. And it's usually about the time that I have outlined, okay, here's where I want to go from start to finish, that I will conceive of a title. But then I start the writing process, and I try to break out my outline. Like, all right, in chapter 1, I'm expecting to do this. By chapter 5, I'm expecting to do that. But I've often found once I start writing it, what I said was chapter 1 is actually chapter like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because there's so many things that I want to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then you're also kind of organically letting things add. Yeah. You're adding meat to, you're adding the meat to the dinner, and you're adding meat to the entire story. So yeah, it's you know, I think you can always tell, unfortunately, when you sit down to read a fic, that whether the author had a really clear sense of where they were going, and then
those
a lot of the surprise, and the plot twists and the surprises that happen, you can see that they're purposeful. In hindsight, you can see like, oh, okay, yeah, that was clever, and then the writer really had no idea, and it started as one thing and it ended as another thing, which isn't always a bad thing, but
like when there's no clear, be a good story,
or no clear idea of what the story's even going to be, you're like, okay, all right, yeah, this needs some work.
Fair. One thing that, like, if I was going to write like a novel, I think I would do differently than I have done with fan fiction is like complete a whole work and then go back and move pieces or create pieces to sort of have that better things that were laid out early that you don't recognize them as like signs for what's coming, because that I'm not as good at foreshadowing as I would like to be. And I think one reason that is because I have not been a person who writes the whole story and then begins posting chapter by chapter. I write like a chapter or two and then I get that posted and I keep going with the writing process and like posting along the way. And so if I were, say, 20 chapters in and realize, oh, like it would have been great if there was a hint at this back in chapter 2, well, I've already posted chapter 2, so it's too late for that.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because when I was writing Saint Severus, I'd had probably a good half of it written before I started posting chapters, and the problem was real life caught up to me, and then I ended up writing the last couple chapters chapter by chapter, which is what I was used to doing in the past. But I actually really loved getting a good chunk of the story written, because it allowed me to go back and insert things earlier, take things out and put them later, move things around. That's of course, hindsight is 2020, but like I look back on the posted original Unquestionable Love as it exists. I love it. I'm very fond of it. It's my baby. But of course, there are things that I would just tweak, write differently, insert here, take this out and put this there. And so I definitely see the benefit of trying. And that's part of the problem with fanfic. It's so hard sometimes when you're onto a really good idea. You just want to share it with people. But definitely see the appeal of trying to write an entire story and have it really polished and have it exactly the way you want it before you click post.
Right. Yeah. It's so hard though when you get so excited.
Yeah. Well, and then obviously when you fanfic is sharing your ideas with a community that you love to be a part of, and part of the appeal of that too is getting the reactions and getting responses from people. And sometimes you get ideas from readers too, or like they pick up on things that you were hoping they wouldn't pick up on yet, or maybe you were hoping they would pick up on. And like that always just helps to motivate you to keep going. A lot of the time it can be, because that's the other component of fanfic too. It can be really lonely if you're going to write an entire 40 chapter story without sharing an ounce of it with anybody until you're finally finished with it. A lot of times writers need that motivation chapter to chapter to keep going with it. Like, is anybody interested in this? Does anybody want to read this? Because if not, then
in the right way.
Yeah, or do you post something that is going to be 40 chapters worth and people aren't really responding to it, or maybe not in the way that you had hoped. And it's like, oh, well, I still have I have 35 more chapters, guys. Are you going to want to read this or not? So I don't know. I see the draw and the drawbacks of both.
Yeah, definitely. When you are approaching the process and sort of crafting where you're going to go, do you use any special tools related to your writing? Like, do you storyboard things out or create red strings on the wall or a bunch of sticky notes on your desk?
Yeah, what's that meme of that guy with all the red lines?
I think it's from Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I wish that was me. I wish I was that chaotic. I'm really not. Yeah, no, I'm boring in the sense that I type up a basic outline in Word, and that's about it. I guess I'm very old school in that sense. I don't have sticky notes. I don't have a storyboard. I don't really have anything like that.
Totally
very boring.
When I first got started writing fan fiction, I was even more old school than plot points in Word. I literally, if I went digging through my house, I probably could find them. Have notebooks where I'm here's what I think should happen. And somewhere I should have a tablet of paper that was for the chosen one where it's broken out by school year. All right, this is the school year. And then I'd start with here's things that I know happened in that school year because it's from the Harry Potter books. Now let me weave my character through them.
Yeah.
And then it's I grew up to putting it in Word. And then in the most recent work that I had done, I actually started using Excel because I liked to be able to just drag and drop plot points if I wanted to move them. I found that a little easier than Word editing. And when you really think about it, it's honestly exactly the same. I don't know why. I just preferred Excel.
You like the visual stimulation of the Excel.
Yeah. Which is hilarious because I'm not in finance. I basically don't use Excel that much at work really, but I enjoy the program. And that's probably the nerdiest thing I've ever said.
More analytical when it comes to writing versus in other aspects of your life. So that's cool.
Yeah. Okay, so what are your thoughts on beta readers?
Well, I had a beta reader who was in the Severus and Hermione community well before I even, dipped my toes and started sharing Unquestionable Love. So I'm eternally grateful for them. She ended up being a dear friend of mine. We've since lost touch, but she better read a number of my stories for years, and I would not have become a more decent writer if it wasn't for her catching all of my mistakes. And a lot of the stuff that I was doing early on that we're our own worst enemies, but we also don't always see things that are right in front of us. Mm-hmm. I think they're a great asset. I think they're a great tool. I feel like I've progressed to a comfortable point where I'm okay not having one for every story that I write, but I would never have gotten to that spot had I not had somebody looking over my work repeatedly and showing me the consistent mistakes I was making and the technical errors and the things that I really needed to work on. So, I think they're a godsend. I think especially if you're just starting out in fanfic and you want to use this tool to become a better writer, absolutely take advantage of them.
Mm-hmm. I think they're saints. I often wonder, are they copy editors in real life, or are they just, this is something they're passionate about, they don't do it professionally, but they do it just in the fan fiction world. I certainly could never be one because, one, I'm dyslexic, but two, I feel like grammar is a second language that I'm still trying to learn. And so if you asked me to edit someone else's grammar, forget about it. I would be the worst beta in the world.
Well, and I'm right there with you because I beta read, this was years ago, for a couple different people that had been readers of mine that I'd become friends with. Mm-hmm. And I just found it like I was hot under the collar. I didn't enjoy it because it's like all the things that I could see in my own writing that I used to do early on, and got where I was seeing it in them, and like, that's okay. Like, we all start from somewhere, but I just hated having to be the one to break certain things to them. Like, oh, you know, and I don't know. I hate having to strike things out. Seeing that red editing software, like that gave so much anxiety that I was like, yeah, no, I'm not cut out to do this. As much as I want to be able to help other people, like, I have enough work just trying to help myself with my own storytelling. So yeah, no, they are saints.
Yeah, for sure. You talk about that red editing, and I have to tell you, I am so bothered by that I went into my word settings and I changed it so that when edit tracks are on, the changes are blue, because the red bothered me that much.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I probably should have done that. Maybe it would have calmed me down a little bit.
It's like this weird, like, school trauma that I feel like we all have about red ink. But like, yeah, it is actually a thing you can change in Word, which I went and like watched a YouTube video on how to do it, because I was like, listen, I can't deal with the red marks anymore. There's got to be a way to fix this.
Yeah, no, I definitely should have taken advantage of that. That probably would have made my life a little bit easier.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think I could ever be a beta reader, but I could be a sensitivity reader. Like, for someone who's reading for content, and whether or not maybe you're being inadvertently offensive, or if this is not going to play well with a community, I think I could definitely do that. But not for like spelling and grammar.
Yeah. I almost think, on those lines, maybe I would be best suited, if I was going to be a better reader at all, would be for plot holes.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
pretty good at that, spotting plot holes, or, you know, if you're revealing something too early, or if you should have maybe put a hint to that to give some kind of fair warning that was coming, that sort of thing.
How do you feel about crack fics? And would you write one?
I think I would at some point. I think, I have to be in an absolutely ridiculous headspace. And I think I could get there, just with the stress I have in my life right now. I probably writing a crack fic at this particular moment in time would be good for me.
Therapeutic. Yeah. I prescribe it to you. You have to go do it now.
Yeah. Especially with like the state of the world too. Like, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't seek them out though. Like, I don't read them enough. And again, I'm not like really heavily involved in fandom at the moment, but I do appreciate them. They have their place, and just like fanfic in general is a therapy tool for so many of us, whether we're writers or readers. I think craft fics have their place, just, when you need a good laugh normally. Yeah. I've never written one, and I don't like necessarily seek them out, but I do appreciate them.
Yeah. The closest I ever got to writing a crack fic, and I would not classify this story as a crack fic, was one where I did a pairing between Hermione and Fred, and the whole story started from like a joke of like Fred short-sheeting someone, and so it had a lot of humor to it, and there were pranks like sprinkled throughout, but that's as close as I've ever gotten. So I haven't really written one. I've definitely read a few, but I've never found them on purpose. It's usually like you can't sleep, you're up like searching the tags at like 2 a.m, and it just happens to fall within a pairing that you're interested in. And I'm like, okay, that sounds ridiculous. I have to go read it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Half the fun too is reading the reviews, because there's people that get the humor in them and absolutely like are just rip roaring with laughter, and then there's people that get so offended and butter. It's like, it's a crack fic. Like, it's obviously like poking fun at itself.
Yeah.
But,
oh gosh. I have a friend. It's the same person that we had on in a previous episode to talk about pairings. Stray. She loves crack fics. It's like her joy in the world. And so if you're ever like, I want a crack fic with this character, like, she probably just has like, will roll through her mental encyclopedia and will give you like the perfect recommendation to go like, oh, just search this title and you're gonna love it.
That's a great friend to have. That's a great buddy to have.
She's perfect. We'll keep her forever. Okay, so how do you feel about stories with or without lemons? Like,
oh yeah, I love lemons myself. I do, but I'm not one of those who's like, oh, I won't read a fic if it doesn't have lemons in it. Mm-hmm. Especially considering, you know, I've written a couple that didn't have lemons in them, or had very limited lemons in them. And I mean, I keep coming back to it, but an example of that is the original Unquestionable Love. I think it has one lemon in it in the entire almost 60 chapters, because it's not about the lemons.
Yeah, it's not about physicality.
Oh yeah, so it just depends on what people are seeking out and what they want. Because I've written stories that have very, very limited lemons, but then Unto Their Own has a number of very, I guess I'd say pretty raunchy lemons. So, you know,
yeah,
I appeal of both. I don't feel strongly for one over the other, whether as a writer or a reader.
Totally fair. I feel like I have a love-hate relationship with them, because like I will read a story with or without them, enjoy both. But I feel like the reason that fan fiction can become taboo is the non-fan fiction community member who thinks that all fan fiction is just a bunch of written porn. And so then there's like a shame that comes with saying that you write fan fiction or that you read fan fiction, because they just go, oh, okay, so you're just reading a bunch of word porn. And it's like, it's not what it is at all. And if you read fan fiction, you would know that. But because it gets applied to it, I tend to be like, oh, well, I don't want anyone to know that I've read a story that has a lemon in it, because then they're going to judge me. Or I don't want to write a lemon, because then people are going to be like, oh, that's all you were doing. Even though I have written stories that have lemons, I still have these thoughts. But then also I just find them so awkward to write, even though like you'll be writing a story and you're like, it just makes sense that this is what would happen here. I'm like, I'm going to write it, but I'm going to be uncomfortable the whole time.
Blushing, I'm looking over my shoulder, make sure nobody's looking.
Right.
Yeah.
I need like a privacy screen on my monitor.
Lemon's like with the most placé facial expression the entire time. Mm-hmm. Now that I think, I think that just comes from writing a lot of lemons over the years, that like it gets easier and more like just, okay, this is what we're gonna write now. This is what's gonna happen between these two. Blah, 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 let's get through it. Whereas like in the beginning, like, oh God, I gotta put this in here. I mean, what's gonna happen? But like, do I have to go there? Like, how I gotta go read some lemons to like make sure that like I can be in the mood to write this now. Like, I don't know. It's now it's so like, I hate to say second nature to write that kind of stuff, but like in the beginning, it was like, oh my God, I'm gonna write a lemon. Like it was like this. It was like, this is what I'm gonna write now. Okay.
Yeah.
But
what do you think about lemons where like it's clear that the author hasn't really thought about what they've said? Like they're just like, oh, that'll sound hot, but then you think about like that's not anatomically possible.
Yeah.
They happen.
That's all really uncomfortable scrolling out. Like, oh, okay. Yeah. This. How old are you? Are you 12? 11? Like, are you?
I can tell by this lemon, you've never personally experienced a lemon.
Oh yeah, and I think some of the worst of that, but it's also really funny is, especially with really young writers, is the way they'll have the characters talk to each other too, or interact in a lemon scene. You're like, oh God, like Sneap sounds like he's 14. Like, what is happening? Awful. Like, what am I reading?
Yeah. Something, I feel like this is going to sound so weird, but like a positive that I would say from like reading lemons is I feel like it's given me a very good poker face, because sometimes they'll come up with like on you unexpectedly, and you might be like sitting on the bus and all of a sudden, okay, I'm reading a lemon on the bus, and you don't want to look like you're reading a lemon on the bus.
I don't know. I still think that's really brave to be able to read lemons out in public. I think I've only done, I don't know, maybe 3 times in general. Usually, like if I'm reading fanfic, I'm in the comfort of my home. I've got my, you know, robe half over my head, and I've got my phone pressed up against my nose, and yeah, I'm sure that nobody's looking still to this day.
Valid. I mean, to be clear, I have never sought intentionally to read a lemon in public, but I tend to be honest, I haven't actually read fan fiction in a while, but I would tend to like read it on my phone, and so like I just look like I'm sitting there scrolling on my phone. No one's gonna bug me, and I'm just reading. And then every once in a while, you're like, "Oh, okay, wasn't expecting this in the middle of my lunch break, but here we are." There's more safety to reading in your living room.
there is, to be fair, and I've always been more prone to reading on my computer, actually. I guess that shows how old school I am, to reading on my phone, because I can't stand how small the font is and having to make everything so much bigger to read. So in that sense, I guess I already have my safety net.
That's true. I don't know if I've ever read one on my phone or on my computer.
That's how I've ever done it, pretty much.
Maybe,
rarely on.
Fair. Maybe back when I was first getting into fan fiction, because I'm thinking now, when I wrote my first one, it was 2008, and I definitely didn't have a smartphone, so I must have started out with reading on the computer. But God, doesn't 2008 feel like it was 5,000 years ago?
Yeah, on the one hand, and then it feels like it was last year.
Right? Yeah.
Oh my.
Okay, so my last question, thoughts on reviewers? Because I think we could talk about loving reviewers. I think we also could talk about hating reviewers. It really just depends on how the reviewer is acting. But like, where do you fall?
Yeah. I love reviewers generally. You know, I want them to engage in what I've put my heart and soul into, basically. Mm-hmm. Not to sound like really corny and cliche, but you are doing that. I think there's just unreasonable sometimes expectations from readers. Either they want the answers to everything up front and don't trust the process, or they don't trust where you might be taking the characters, that they might personally be offended or uncomfortable with. But, you know, that's why a lot of trigger warnings exist. That's why we have specific genres, so you can seek out what you want to read, what you don't want to read. Mm-hmm. I think at the end of the day, there's no monitoring this kind of content. So if you freely click on something, I don't feel like you have the right to be upset and offended if the story doesn't go in the direction that you wanted it to, or the characters didn't do what you anticipated that they might do, or the story didn't end how you would personally have liked it to. So sometimes I think some of the criticism can be off base in that sense, because sometimes readers just have these personal expectations that we can't meet because we can't read their minds, and obviously we're not necessarily writing for them, we're writing for ourselves. But I mean, at the end of the day, I love my readers. My readers are very supportive generally. They're really, really good people. They're uplifting, and they really are what have kept me all these years writing. Now, granted, I haven't written anything in over a year. I'm very behind, but I do appreciate their feedback and the fact that they took the time to sit down and read a new chapter of something that I wrote. Like that to me is still to this day, like, exciting and wild and mind-blowing that anybody wants to sit down and just even take time out of their busy schedule to read something I wrote. But I think there's also the really ugly side to fandom. is that you do have the reviewers that are just flaming and just want to hate on you, which is why I ended up having to leave fanfiction.net and Archive of Our Own for like my own like mental health and well-being, because I couldn't take, and I'm sure it was probably just one or two people at the end of the day, but like it was relentless just trolling and hate commenting, and it just got to a point where I was like, this almost doesn't feel worth it to me, to my own like, you know, mental health.
Yeah, it sucks the joy out of it.
Yeah, it's so, it sucks because there's the wonderful side to fandom, which generally is the readers who, for the most part, have good intentions towards writers and appreciate what we do. Like, we're giving them free entertainment, and they love that, and they eat it up, and they want to read more from us, and God bless them. But then there's the ugly side to the internet, which is, you know, these you know, computer warriors that sit behind a computer screen and just want to hate on you and flame on you. And I think because I've been kind of removed from fandom a bit over the past like year and a half that I haven't been writing, I think if I went back to public sharing of my stories again, I think I could withstand it and like honestly really not care all that much. And I don't know, maybe it comes from going through the pandemic and going through everything that entailed and what that did to me mentally, that like now I'm just like, okay, whatever. I don't know who you are. At the end of the day, like majority of the people in this community I know are good people, and they like what I'm writing, and that's fine. So yeah, I'm mixed about it. I appreciate the readers that I have. Certainly, I'm so grateful for them, and that anybody even keeps coming back to read anything that I wrote. But yeah, there's also this ugly side of the fandom that, for me personally, it made me run away, and it's why I have to write now under a password access only account, because that was the only way I felt like I could get any peace from it. So
yeah,
that was a very long answer. Sorry.
No, it's a good answer, and I think it really encompasses like the light and the dark of that two-way communication platform that comes with being on the internet. And I actually was thinking about what you had said about the pandemic, because I think that I have a much lower sensitivity to just that nonsense than I did before. And I had not, until you said that, realized that it's largely tied to like what the last 3 years has been like. I had kind of just mentally attributed it to like, oh, I'm getting older, I guess I don't care as much about that stuff anymore. But no, I think it's like we got hit with stuff that was so much worse than someone being a jerk about not liking a plot point, that I'm like, okay, a flame is pretty trivial at this point. And I don't know, I just never thought about it until this moment, and so I'm having this like aha moment. But I think largely I like taking flames out of it. I have loved reviews because I have developed some of my best friendships with other writers, and with some that don't write very often and would definitely just call themselves readers, through things that started out as like they did a review and I commented back, because that was something that I tried to do anytime I got a review, unless it was someone just being nasty, because, you know, it would come through, like you get a message about it, that this review is, so you could respond to it. So I would always like thank them for reviewing, and if they'd asked a question in the review, I would answer it. And so I'd end up with these back and forths. Like, I'm still pen pals with a girl that lives in like the Netherlands, and that whole relationship started because she was an avid reader of my fan fiction and would review every chapter.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like that relationship wouldn't exist without reviews. So I think largely I feel positively about them, even though like I've gotten my fair share of people just being nasty.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've had some wonderful friendships that have come out of this whole fandom, fan fiction experience that I wouldn't have otherwise. So yeah, no, I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I've had just to meet and chat with other people in the community, and some of them I've ended up meeting in person, which has just been cool. Yeah, really, really cool. And you know, so when when fandom does serve the right purpose, there's so much wonderful joy and experiences that come out of it. It's just, it sucks that, you know, there's that whole ugly side to the internet that wants to try and ruin things. But I think having, again, been through the pandemic, but also like I've gone through some stuff personally the last couple of years that like, yeah, no, I think I have a much higher threshold for withstanding that now that I wouldn't have a couple of years ago. So yeah, and I sometimes I go back and forth all the time, like, oh, do I want to go public with my writing again? Because, you know, and really a lot of it is I miss some of the readers that I used to interact with regularly. So there's definitely there's a wholesome, wonderful, good side to it. And I mean, we need writers, of course, in the fanfic community, because, you know, they're our escapism, but we also as much need readers, more so than they probably realize. They're really what lifts us up and half the time keeps us going and sharing. So
definitely. Well, that is my last question for you. So what I'd like to do is give you an opportunity to tell people where they can find you if they want to interact with you or read your material.
Yeah, sure. So I still have all of my old stories up on fanfiction.net under CRMEDIAGAL. So you can always go there if you want to read any of my older stories. I think there's like 40 to 45 fics on there. But then I also have my own website, crmediagal.com, where I've posted a number of new works since. It is password encrypted, so you do have to request access, but and it might take me couple days to get back to you, but I'll give you access if you fill out the form to read any of my newer stories. I haven't updated in a while, but my hope is later this year that I am going to get back into writing more so, because I do miss it. And then I'm also on and then I'm also on Instagram and YouTube under CRMEDIAGAL as well. So I'm pretty much the same everywhere.
It makes it easy to find you. And I know I personally always look forward to, even if it's sporadic, that email popping up like, hey, there's an update on CRMEDIAGAL's website. Come check it out. Like,
oh, I love that. Thank you. I'm so bad. There hasn't been one in like a year and a half. But
no judgment. Life happens.
I'm coming back. I'll make my comeback. I will.
Perfect. I'll be waiting. All right.
Thanks.
Well, thanks for tuning in, Muggles. If you're jonesing for more witchy goodness between episodes, you can check us out on Instagram at Dusty Cauldron Podcast, Gmail at dustycauldronpodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to our website, dustycauldronpodcast.com. You can subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening if you'd like to hear more. And don't forget to stir whatever you've got brewing in your cauldron right now. Bye!